good day to our viewing and listening public. Welcome to another edition of Budget in Focus, where we sit with Minister of Legal Affairs and Attorney General of Guyana, the Honorable Mohabir Anil Nandlall. Now, Minister Nandlall, firstly, Budget 2022. We know that this has been a historical and transformational budget. Generally, your thoughts on Budget 2022?
I am particularly privileged to be part of this budget, to be living at this point in time in Guyana. I feel blessed to be part of the current generation of Guyanese. Our people came from a history of struggle in which we have faced tremendous hardship, coming from our historical past, from slavery, indentureship, colonialism. Then we had political dictatorship after independence. We had economic and financial bankruptcy. And then we have some sort of development from 1992 to now. Then during that 2015, 2020, there was stagnation again. So we have had our trials and tribulations as a country and as a people. We struck oil, and that marked the beginning of what must be a transformed Guyana. The proceeds from our oil wealth is now going to be drawn down. Naturally, it's not business as usual anymore for Guyana and for Guyanese. The process of ascendancy from an impoverished nation to a prosperous one is now beginning. This budget lays the framework and the foundation for that journey of ascent, which will begin really in the year 2022. That is captured in the budget. The budget, for example, if one is to compare it with last year's budget was about 382 billion thereabouts. Yeah. This budget is $552 billion, an increase by over 50%. Guyana and Guyanese have never experienced a financial injection into the economy of this magnitude. So we have to brace ourselves for that. The mere fact, forget the spin-off benefits for the time being, the mere fact that $552 billion is scheduled to be spent from now to December, from February to December, is a staggering phenomenon for one to even grasp. There will be an explosion of economic activities by the mere expenditure of this huge and mammoth, unprecedented sum of money. Thousands of jobs immediately are going to be created. This money has to be spent, whether for the building of roads, whether for the building of bridges, whether for the building of hospitals, playgrounds, stadia, schools, health centers, drainage canals. It is going to be spent. And it is going to be spent in Guyana. And every single Guyanese will benefit from that expenditure. The construction phase will lead to another massive, unprecedented construction boom. The materials will have to be purchased from our hardware stores and from our businesses right across the country. Just imagine how much sand will have to be sold, how much concrete blocks will have to be sold, how much wood will have to be sold, how much building materials, and I can go down the line, but you get the picture of what I'm speaking about.
Right.
I am speaking about a level of spending and a level of influx of money in this economy never anticipated before. That by itself will be a cultural, a social, a financial, and an economic shock to this country. It is like giving a strong dose of steroid to a horse before a race. You understand what I'm speaking about? That is the first thing one has to understand about this budget. The second point I want to emphasize about this budget, we have heard a lot of criticisms being leveled against the government in relation to the NRF bill and the intention to withdraw from the Sovereign Wealth Fund the sum of money that is now accumulated there. Well, to those critics, this budget presents an unanswerable defense. That is to say, that all the monies that are coming into the country are in the budget. So there was allegation of thievery, there was allegation of wasteful spending, of corruption. 125 billion Guyana dollars will come into the economy from the Sovereign Wealth Fund, into the consolidated fund. And it has to be spent in the budget there. Yeah. It's reflected there. 552 billion, an increase of 100 and something billion from last year. So first of all, those who said that the money will be squandered, that has been answered. The money is in the budget, and it's plain for even the fiercest critic of the government to see that this is a budget that guarantees prosperity, at least lay the foundation for prosperity for every single Guyanese. The money is in the budget and will be spent in those projects. So health has been allocated some $78 billion. Health, the health sector, it got about $32 billion last year. It's getting more than double this year. Who will benefit from that? Who will benefit from that if not the ordinary Guyanese, from rich to poor? They go to the health sector in Guyana. Education, another some 70 something billion. It was, I think, 28 billion in last year, 2021. It's more than double this year. Who will benefit? If not the children, our students in the schools, from all walks of life. The oil money belongs to the people of Guyana. And this budget is a clear manifestation, representation, and expression of that money being spent for the betterment of the Guyanese people and the advancement of the welfare of this nation. I don't think anyone can dispute that. Home Affairs, for example, is 40-something billion, more than double of what it was last year. Who will benefit from the Home Affairs budget? The Guyana Police Force, the Guyana Prison Service. Those are the agencies that will be spending the money. And who are they spending the money in relation to? Who will be enjoying public safety and the services from the improved services from the police force in this country, if not the ordinary Guyanese? and indeed every Guyanese. And I can go sector by sector doing the same type of exemplification. But I think the point is made. This budget lays the foundation upon which modern Guyana will be constructed, and the framework. This is the most important of it all. Anybody who is acquainted with building a building will tell you that perhaps the most fundamental component of the construction is laying the foundation and the framework, because that is what determines the strength, the durability, the size, and the longevity of the building. A firm and solid foundation and framework is established in this budget for future budgets to be built upon as Guyana continues to climb this ladder of development. The budget, while it embraces mega projects of a transformational nature, as we have spoken about, all the roadways, the new housing schemes, the Demerara Harbor Bridge, all the new highways, the Schooner to Parika Highway, and all the farm to market roads, and all of that is there. All of that are there. But it's not a budget that focuses only on the mega projects. It's a budget that strikes a delicate balance, because we recognize that the ordinary man and woman may not be able to connect him or herself with these mega projects, connect their lives with these mega projects. But the budget addresses frontally concerns and aspects of their welfare in the most minutiae way that a budget can. So straight down to old age pension has been increased. Income tax threshold for personal income increased. Cash grant voucher increase. Duties, excise tax and VAT removed from certain categories of vehicles. The mortgage ceiling interest has been shifted for the benefit of the borrower. So you have a large menu of measures targeting the working people of our country. And in any society, they are the largest. As I said, they are going to benefit from these mega projects, but they may not be able to see it. The farmers, for example, in relation to the rising cost of living, there is a menu of ameliorating measures. The price for gas will be reduced because we have reduced the excise tax on the importation of gas from 20% to 10%. We have continued to calculate freight at the pre-COVID rate so that to bring down the shipping cost, which will eventually lead to lowering of the prices in the store for the ordinary man. We have measures in there that will treat with helping farmers dispose of their products. And then we have a very fluid mechanism explained by the minister that will allow adjustments to be made where necessary to ensure that our businesses and our companies and our citizens are permitted to participate with parity in the oil and gas sector as is mandated by our local content legislation. I have attended the consultations with our business sector, and the complaint is that the playing field is not level, that the foreign companies that are closely aligned with the oil sector and the oil sector companies themselves enjoy certain tax concessions and benefits which the locals do not enjoy. So if you open the door for the local participation of the population in the industry, but you don't remove these barriers that make it incompetitive, then the locals are operating at a disadvantage. So in the budget, you would find a paragraph there where the Minister of Finance said that adjustments will be made to remove these disadvantageous or advantageous hindrances that exist between the local and the foreign. Of course, and we have Guyana economy has positioned itself strategically in this budget not to place an overwhelming emphasis on proceeds for oil. What we have done here is to establish a framework that will allow the use of proceeds from oil and the benefits from that industry to ensure that it enhances productivity in other sectors. So you have expansion in the agriculture sector with focus now on areas, in addition to the traditional sugar and rice, there is specific mention in relation to coconut production. That's a thriving industry. This year, and I will speak about that later, hemp will come on stream. And as a new sector altogether that has exponential potential for blossoming in a country like Guyana. So, and of course, there is a projection that our economy, both in the oil sector and in the non-oil sector, and the economy as a whole, is expected to grow. I think the statistic cited is to grow by some nearly 50%. In the non-oil sector, by over 7%. That alone, that non-oil sector alone, compared to the rest of the Caribbean, would be the fastest growing sector in this hemisphere. Definitely Guyana, growing at nearly 50% per annum. It will be the fastest growing nation in this hemisphere. This budget anticipates all of that and will begin that envious but welcomed transformational process that Guyanese so much deserve, as I said, having regard to our historical past of poverty and suffering. I am very excited that I am part of this process. One last point I want before you come in. The oil money again, because I want to make this point very emphatically. As I said, it's reflected in the budget. So the monies will come from the consolidated fund. This budget has to be approved. This budget and the estimates that will come will have to be interrogated by the opposition in the National Assembly. That's how democracy works. Right. So every single dollar of the oil money that is coming from the Sovereign Wealth Fund will be interrogated by the opposition on live television. In Guyana now, everything is streamed on the internet. You can be on your cell phone and follow the process in the parliament. So the public will see the defense that the government will have to proffer when these questions are asked. And hopefully they will be asked in a competent way to provide a platform for the government to give the explanation, because that is what we are committed to. The Santiago principles, which we embrace in our National Natural Resource Fund Act, mandate that there be transparency and that there be accountability. And that is what that legislation emphasizes in a fundamental way. So not a dollar will be spent in an opaque way. Every single dollar has to be approved by the National Assembly. And then that fund itself will have to be audited by the Auditor General, and a report from the Oversight Committee. The fund also has an Oversight Committee that will examine, analyze, and scrutinize the fund and prepare a report and lay it to the chairman of the Public Accounts Committee, an opposition member. All these are inherent checks and balances. The Auditor General, in doing his audit, can choose any audit firm in the world to assist him. So he can go internationally and get Pricewaterhouse or one of those big names in the accounting arena to assist him. That is the kind of mechanism that is in that act. Yet you hear these irresponsible and unbelievable criticisms coming from people who I am convinced have not read that piece of legislation. I don't think they have read the budget. No, I know that they have not read the budget. I know. Because from yesterday to today, they can't read it. They don't read it when you give them a week. Most if you give them a day. But if you hear their views, they have already begun the condemnatory dialogue about the budget. But that's okay. Because the people of Guyana listen to the minister. The people of Guyana are not stupid. They are already enamored with this budget. And they are saying it every day. Check the social media if you want a good barometer, and listen to the comments. Of course there are negatives, but the positives far outnumber the negatives. You see, we are living in a sophisticated age. We are living in the era of information and technology. It's difficult to keep people in a state of ignorance. It's really difficult. So the opposition and critics of this budget will really have a hard time in finding criticisms in the first place. And if they intend to fabricate and concoct, then they do so at their own peril, because they will stand to lose credibility if they do so. Because the people have heard the minister, and that is why I'm sitting here, to ensure that the people understand further, so that we can elaborate more of what the minister said and what is in due course in that budget to be delivered to the people in terms of goods and services and projects and infrastructure.
So, Minister Nandlall, we spoke extensively about the general outlook of Budget 2022. Now, focusing a bit on your sector, the legal affairs sector, we spoke a lot about modernizing Guyana's legislative framework. Now, in 2022, what can the people of Guyana expect to see happen in the Ministry of Legal Affairs?
Now, no country can develop without the requisite legal framework in place and legal foundation laid. A country is governed by law. Many of these mega projects that you're seeing, they need laws to sometimes kickstart them or to regulate the way that they function. So we had to have the NRF Fund Act to deal with the issue of the monies drawn from the sector, the oil and gas sector. We had to bring a local content law to protect our population's interest in terms of employment and participating in that sector. Similarly, we have to get legislation for many of these mega projects The minister spoke, for example, about a transformation at the Gaisuku Training School at Port Morant. Most likely, that has to be done by a legislation. You hear a lot about the Gas to Shore project. There is a legislation that will lay out the framework of how that project will be designed and managed. So in almost every area of endeavor, mega endeavor in this budget, you have legislation that has to be drafted, that have to be drafted. It is the Legal Affairs Ministry that is tasked with that responsibility. And that is a massive undertaking by itself. Then, as we are moving our country, as I said, up the ladder, from third world to perhaps a different level, we have to modernize the legal infrastructure. So we have a Public Health Act, for example, that was enacted by Great Britain in Guyana in 1932. That is nearly 100 years old. The health sector in Guyana has transformed since then. Guyana as a country is transformed since 100 years ago. So we have to get a new Public Health Act. We are working on that now. A lot of attention and monies have been pumped into the agriculture sector because it is expected that Guyana will play now a lead role in CARICOM, not only in primary production, but also in processing of food, in value added, and all geared for export. We have new abattoirs that are coming. We have a new pig slaughterhouse, I don't know what's the right word for it, that is being built, to ready Guyana to participate internationally in the trade of food and vegetables. We have to comply with international standards. The United Nations Food Organization has certain international prescriptions, and international agencies have other guidelines that we have to follow. They involve crafting of laws that will have to be passed by our parliament, and those engaged in the agro-processing and the food processing trade and business will have to comply with those legal standards that will be contained in those laws. We are in the process of drafting those laws. We are now an oil producer. This is a brand new sector. Many more pieces of legislation have to come. How do we deal with the question of disposal of waste from this sector, which can be hazardous? How do we deal with the question of oil spills? These require laws. You have arbitration. Many of the big companies that are now coming to Guyana, especially in the oil and gas sector, they prefer to settle their disputes by way of arbitration and outside of the court system. Our arbitration law is several decades old. It's a relic. We are working on a modern arbitration bill with accompanying infrastructure. And I can go on in almost every sector to tell you what is happening in my sector in relation to those sectors in terms of drafting laws. In almost every area. We have an anti-dumping bill, for example, that will protect Guyana from being a dump site for products. So harmful, pernicious products will be prohibited from entering the country. We are working, for example, on a new food and drugs bill, because the one that we have is completely out of sync with today's food and drugs. So there are a whole host of legislation that are in the pipeline being worked on and will have to be taken to the Parliament in due course and in a short time, I must say, to facilitate some of the developmental projects that are scheduled to take place in the budget. Then we have the justice sector. While the judiciary is an independent constitutional agency, it is the executive that has to fund the program for the judiciary. In any country, law and order is the basis upon which a civil society exists. In the absence of law and order, in the absence of a functioning justice system, you have anarchy. All these developments will mean nothing if you have riots every day, if you have violence every day, if you have no law and order. Not a single one of these projects can materialize if you have a breakdown of law and order in the country. So the legal sector is integrally entwined in the developmental agenda of Guyana. So access to justice is a fundamental ingredient in a democracy and for there to be peace and order. A man must feel that if his rights are infringed, if his freedom transgressed, he must have a system to which he must turn that will hear him and determine his cause competently, fairly, and deliver in the end what is broadly considered to be a just result. Any society that lacks such a system is a society that will break down into chaos, violence, and anarchy. So, in order to guarantee access to justice and to protect the constitutional and fundamental rights and freedoms of our citizens, we have to continue to invest heavily in the justice sector. We have to continue to build courts because our population is growing. So on the east bank of the Demerara, you have two courts, magistrates court, one at Providence and one at Grove Diamond. Now, anyone who has traveled on the east bank of Demerara will see not only the population explosion, but the business explosion, the commercial explosion taking place along the roadway alone, not to mention what's going on beyond. We have new roadways developing. Ogle to Eccles, Eccles to Mandela Avenue, then Eccles to Diamond, and then Diamond to Soosdijk. These areas, business will begin to thrive along these roadways. Houses are being built already along these roadways. We have to have more courts. The two courts there simply are inadequate. So 2 more courts will be built in that area, one at Timeri. Cherry-Jagan Airport will soon have a 5-star international hotel. The government has big plans for a place called Silica City, not far up the Linden-Soosdijk Highway. We have to start to think ahead, plan ahead, and build ahead for that. So we are putting a magistrates court in Timeri. Then along one of the new roads, we have to locate a court somewhere in the vicinity of Supply Friendship area. At Vigilance, there is a court under construction there that will accommodate 2 magistrates courts. So that will complete this year. At Port Kaituma, big area, big locality, there's no court there. There's a court at Matthews Ridge, and there's a court at Mabaruma, but there's none at Port Kaituma. A court is being constructed for the first time at Port Kaituma. Then we have a whole support for criminal justice program that is being funded under the IDB. A major component of that program that will unfold very shortly is the program that I often speak about, the introduction into the prosecutorial arm of the state of LLB graduates who, for whatever reason, have not gone on to complete their legal education at the law school in Trinidad or Jamaica and are now in Guyana. In collaboration with the University of Guyana, a prosecutorial training program will be launched this month. The advertisements supposed to be published in the newspaper this week, inviting applicants. That program will be funded by the government. And when those persons graduate, the intention is to place at least one in every magistrate court to prosecute along with the police prosecutor. The idea is that a person with a Bachelor of Laws degree will perform qualitatively more superior than a police person. And I don't mean any disrespect for our policemen and women. They have done a remarkable job in very difficult circumstances over the years. But the scales of justice must always be balanced. Not only the accused has rights, the victims of the crime must also leave the courts, the precincts of the court, feeling that they have had justice too. So justice is not a one-way street, as some people think. The state has an interest, the public has an interest, and the victims of crime have an interest to protect. The duty of the law, or the intent of the law, is to protect both in a just and balanced way. So this program is intended to do that. We have what is called restorative justice that will come on in a big way this year. Restorative justice is a softer side of the justice system, whereby you go and you try to understand why the crime was committed. Many times we just sentence people, put them in the jail. When they come out back, they go back into the same environment that caused them to go to jail in the first place. Restorative justice has to do with interrogating the reason for the offense and trying to address that as a root problem. So when the man goes in the jail and comes out back to his home, that problem that caused him to go to jail is solved, is no longer there. We believe that that is important. The experts are telling us that. That is the way now that the justice system is moving to have this kind of more scientific or social approach, if you wish, to address the causes of crime rather than sentence the criminal alone. That is part of our agenda this year. And we have constitutional reform. As you know, our government promised constitutional reform. In fact, all the parties promised constitutional reform. This budget has an allocation to deal with constitutional reform. The process has begun. We are meeting in the Standing Committee for Constitutional Reform in the National Assembly. I chair that committee. That committee is currently discussing the modality by which the exercise will be conducted. So that is a work in progress. But this year, we have to determine the way forward. What are we going to use? How this constitutional reform will unfold? Because we have promised that it's going to be a publicly consultative exercise. So we have to work out the modalities for that. So, I mean, I can go on and talk for a lot on the agenda for this year, but I'll pause there.
And as we continue the conversation, you spoke a little bit earlier, Minister Nandlall, about the hemp industry coming to Guyana. Now, the marijuana bill had gone to a special committee last year and is now in that phase of being in that special select committee. What can we see happen with that marijuana bill for 2022?
Currently, we are reviewing an industrial hemp bill. So that hopefully will come on stream as well. I suppose government will determine the path of the bill, but at this stage we are reviewing it at the AG chambers. In relation to the marijuana bill, that is it's called the Narcotics and Psychotropic Substances Amendment Act. It is in a select committee, as you know. The select committee met last week and agreed that we are going to publish notices in the newspapers inviting persons who wish to make recommendations on the bill to do so in writing, and we are stipulating a time for those submissions to be made, and a meeting will be held during the first week of March. After that time we would have received all the requested submissions, and then we will move forward. So that is also a work in progress.
And finally, Minister Nandlall, just to recap our discussion for this evening, the new projects that will be launched by the Ministry of Legal Affairs, what are some of those things that we can expect?
Well, I told you about the restorative justice. We will continue we have to train people in the area. We have done some training. That training will resume. There is a bill that is currently at a cabinet subcommittee where it is receiving the input of other cabinet members and members of parliament. That should be out of there shortly. We are working on sentencing guidelines. You know, persons have been complaining, members of the public, about erratic, inconsistent, sometimes capricious sentencing. We are working on that. We are going to have sentencing guidelines that will guide judges and magistrates in their handing down of sentences. And of course, there are principles that will be contained in those guidelines. We have a bail bill. For the first time, we will introduce a bail bill in Guyana. Again, members of the public have often complained about the inconsistent grant of bail. I had cause recently to challenge the grant of bail by a magistrate when the law did not permit the grant of bail in those circumstances. And recently, in a very historic judgment, a High Court judge agreed with me. I'm waiting for the written judgment so that I can distribute it publicly for people to understand what are the principles in relation to bail. Here is where two Brazilians came here on an aircraft, landed illegally in the country, and the aircraft was filled with what is suspected to be cocaine. They have no passport, they are here illegally, and a magistrate grants them bail. When the law says that bail for narcotics offenses in such quantity shall not be granted unless there is special reason. No special reason at all in accordance with law was before that magistrate. Yet the magistrate granted bail. Some small sum too. Putting on the street two illegal persons who are illegal in the country, not recognizing from the moment they step out of the prison, they are committing offenses every minute because they are illegal. That didn't cross the learned magistrate's mind. So, sentencing guideline is a major thing. We are revising the laws of Guyana, and for the members of the public, revision of the laws means that you are updating the law. So the last exercise we did was in 2012. From 2012 to 2022, we would have passed many, many laws. They are in loose papers all over the place. We need now to put them into the laws of Guyana, insert them. So if they amend, for example, an act, you need to find the section that is amended and type in that amendment. So when you read the law now, you're reading one comprehensive, consolidated laws of Guyana, updated to the year of the update. Now that's a massive exercise that is currently ongoing. An important component of a justice system that non-lawyers may not know is something that's called law reporting. Law reporting is where you compile important cases that would have been decided by the courts, and you put them in volumes, in books. Because cases are decided based upon precedents. So a judge decided this case on this principle. If a case of similar facts arises or occurs at a later date, a judge is entitled to look at that case for guidance. If it's a decision of a higher court, a lower court is bound to follow that decision. It's called the doctrine of precedent. Now, you need a functioning, updated law reporting system if you want to have a proper judiciary and lawyers who will read the law. The last publication of a law report in Guyana was when I was Attorney General. And that was from 1977 to 2007, right? Yeah. Although, and that we did that in 2013. So the next installment of law report I'm currently working on is from 2007 to 2020. So that will bring us straight to 2020. And that is also a work in progress. So we have a lot of work going on at the AG office as part of the government's agenda to transform this country. This budget lays the foundation and the framework. We now have to ensure that it's executed. And that's the other major part of it. I was telling the president today, I don't know how. The procurement process alone. Remember, most of these contracts have to go to procurement. Most of these projects. Procurement is a very slow process. Any part of the world, you have to publish the tenders. You have to invite bids. The bids have to be evaluated. Then you have to award the contract. Then the law requires the contract to receive a no objection from cabinet. You're talking right there, a minimum of a month. Minimum of a month. You're talking about thousands of projects, thousands of contracts that have to go through this process. And it has to be done before the end of the financial year, December the 31st. You're speaking about 552 billion. So to execute it, the budget, is a challenge by itself. Then we have to get workforce. Do we have the labor force to execute this magnitude of projects? That is a challenge. So while the budget is big and we're happy, we also have to put our shoulders to the wheel to ensure that we deliver the goods to the people. Because this is the people's budget. Government is just the machinery that will deliver. The people are entitled to that. It's their money, it's for their benefit. And we have to ensure, at the level of government, that we actually spend the money for the benefit of the people so that the people can see the benefits. I know the president is very strong on this. Every day he implores his cabinet to be innovative, to be aggressive, to push the governmental developmental agenda. Remember, the president himself was a project man, working in Ministry of Housing, a major ministry. President pushed a lot of housing schemes, so he's very experienced in these things. And before that, he worked at state planning. So he understands project management. I believe he studied project management too. So it's a tall order from every conceivable perspective. But the foundation is there, the framework is there to deliver a different quality of life, a superior quality of life for the Guyanese people, to the envy of our neighbors.
Well, Minister Nandlall, we thank you for taking the time to talk with us just a few moments about Budget 2022. For more information about Budget 2022, feel free to visit any one of our social media platforms or dpi.gov.gy for more information. For DPI, I am Shaquan.